years after the military standoffs and bilateral ties between India and China South, the two countries have agreed on disengagement and patrolling arrangements along the line of actual control. But what was the dispute about? Let's find out. Back when communists took power in China, they pulled the country out of all international agreements and the so-called unequal treaties that had been imposed on it during its century of humiliation and demanded a renegotiation of all its borders. Now the border between China and India has never been delimited. In July 1958, an official monthly magazine in China named China Pictorial published a map of the country that would in the next few months become a bone of contention between India and its East Asian neighbor. The map in question showed large parts of the Northeast Frontier Agency and the Himalayan territory of Ladakh as part of China. In January 1960, Chinese Communist Party decided to open negotiations with India and reach an understanding through mutual understanding and mutual concessions. In April that year, China's Premier Zhou Enlai and Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru agreed on a detailed examination of the claims by officials. Over the next 2 years, both sides sought to preserve their claims by posting troops along the border. Then in the 1962 war, the PLA quickly overpowered the Indian troops. The war also led to the formation of the loosely demarcated line of actual control running through Ladakh. Now in 2020, Chinese troops crossed LAC and a fierce clash in the Galwan Valley in June 2020 followed. Since then, troops from the two sides clashed in the northern Sikkim area in 2021 and again in the Tawang sector of the border in 2022. The two countries had been locked in a border standoff for the past 4 years. Now let's understand what is LAC. The LAC separates Indian controlled territory from Chinese controlled territory. It is divided in 3 sectors: the eastern sector, Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim, middle sector, Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh, and western sector of Ladakh. There is the least disagreement in the middle sector. Now in the eastern sector, the alignment of the LAC is along the McMahon line, which takes its name from Sir Henry McMahon, Foreign Secretary of British India, who drew the 890-kilometer line as the border between British India and Tibet at the 1914 Shimla Convention between Great Britain, China and Tibet. The line drawn primarily on the highest watershed principle marked out previously unclaimed, undefined borders between Britain and Tibet and included Tawang in the British Empire. Now China disputes the high watershed principle and some of the positions on the ground that follow. In November 1959, Premier Zhou wrote to Prime Minister Nehru saying the LAC was the so-called McMahon line in the east and the line up to which each side exercises actual control in the west. India rejected this, and during the 1962 war, Nehru said, and I quote, "There is no sense or meaning in the Chinese offer to withdraw 20 kilometers from what they call line of actual control. What is this line of control? Is this the line they have created by aggression since the beginning of September 1962, advancing 40 or 60 kilometers by blatant military aggression and offering to withdraw 20 kilometers provided both sides do this is a deceptive device which can fool nobody." The LAC was discussed during Chinese Premier Li Peng's 1991 visit to India, and India formally accepted the concept when Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao paid a return visit to Beijing in 1993. The two sides signed the agreement on the maintenance of peace and tranquility along the line of actual control. However, the reference to the LAC was unqualified to make it clear that it was not referring to the LAC of 1959 or 1962, but to the LAC at the time when the agreement was signed. Now let's move on to what is China's so-called claim on Arunachal Pradesh and on what grounds. Well, China claims some 90,000 square kilometers of Arunachal Pradesh, the entire state, as its territory. It calls the area Zangan in the Chinese language and makes repeated references to South Tibet. Chinese maps show Arunachal Pradesh as part of China and sometimes parenthetically refer to it as so-called Arunachal Pradesh. China makes periodic efforts to underline this unilateral claim to Indian territory. As part of this strategy, it has tried to give Chinese names to places in Arunachal Pradesh. It published a list of 6 such names in 2017 and another 15 names in 2021. India has dismissed the Chinese invention of these names. Last year, the Ministry of External Affairs said in a statement, and I quote, Arunachal Pradesh has always been and will always be an integral part of India. Assigning invented names to places in Arunachal Pradesh does not alter this fact.